Hey guys, it is Monday, April 6th, and we are doing economics today. Hope you're doing well, hope you enjoyed your weekend. I'm going to be on page 183 today. We're reading pages 183 through 186, and I just want to talk about some of these keywords in this section. So on page 183, it starts the section that talks about business cycles. So I'm going to read a little bit on the right side of page 183. The first new paragraph on the right side. It says, ever since the Great Depression of the 1930s, people have argued about the causes of sudden changes in an economy's health. These recurrent fluctuations in the level of economic activity form what economists call the business cycle. So these business cycles are fluctuations in how the businesses are doing in a country or in a market at any given time. So a business cycle, if you understand the concept at all, you'll understand that business is not always the same from one part of the year to another or from one year to another. So we compare these cycles in times of good and plenty and times where things are a little bit harder. Those are the cycles that businesses go through, and we call the business cycle. It says this means that although the business of a particular firm or industry can be especially good during one month, business can be remarkably poor the next month. So, good examples of this, your book uses one, I'm just going to go ahead and read it. It says, during the weeks before Christmas, demand for goods increases sharply because people buy more presents and other goods than they do during other times of the year. Store managers order more goods from their suppliers weeks beforehand in anticipation of the Christmas season demand. And during the month of December, many temporary clerks and warehouse personnel are hired because more labor is needed during this rush season. So you see that the business cycle, it will fluctuate throughout the year. If you're a retail store around the Christmas time, December, late November, they tend to hire what they call seasonal workers. And that's because the cycle for that business is going to increase. It's going to be a busy season. So they obviously need more workers to keep up with their customer base. They also need more supply to keep up with the increase in sales. So that would be like an up cycle in the business cycle. It says, on the other hand, demand falls off at most shops and merchandising centers during the middle of summer. People are away from home on vacation or they avoid shopping because of the heat. Therefore, store managers try to reduce their supply of goods by holding sales such as sidewalk sales you see outdoors. So what your book is saying here is that just as Christmas is a good season for most retail businesses, middle of summer in some places could be a bad season because people tend to shop less in some areas. So it's a pretty simple concept here. Business is good, you need more supply, you need more workers to handle that demand. Whenever it is a down business cycle, you might have to lay off workers, you might have to decrease your supply, hold sales, and run promotional ads to try to get more people into your stores than they normally would come in. Alright, so the four main components of a business cycle are the expansion, peak, recession, and trough. And you're going to need to memorize those four components there of the business cycle. The expansion, peak, recession, and trough. So we're going to talk about those four components. So expansion is an increase in the GDP or gross domestic product for a nation at any certain time. So gross domestic product is basically all of the suppliers and companies within the U.S. Now they don't have to be just U.S. companies. It could be foreign companies, but operating in the U.S. So all goods produced within the country for a year we call a gross domestic product. And it's how we gauge how much our country is producing, which typically translates to how much business is doing at this time, how good business is. So if you're producing more products, it indicates a higher demand for goods, higher sales, and things of that nature. So we measure that with gross domestic product or GDP. And what they're saying is in an expansion period, you can see that the economy starts to boom. It's the beginning of a rising economy, and you can see that during this time, businesses will start to produce more goods. So you have expansion, and then you have the peak. Now the peak is the top of the business cycle. It's the highest point of the cycle where businesses is really, really good and the GDP is performing on a max level. So the peak is the top point in the business cycle. Well, after the peak comes the recession. And this is pretty much where our economy is at right now. You saw that we went through a great period of expansion with President Trump. We hit a peak where we had the lowest unemployment numbers ever for almost all sections of the country. Huge numbers in the stock market like it's never seen before. And right now we've hit a little bit of a recession. Now the thing to keep in mind with the recession, it says although there is no clear distinction between recessions and depressions, the term depression is normally reserved for a recession that is unusually severe and long lasting. So recession is a term that is used a lot because it's an ordinary part of a business cycle. But the term depression is something that we reserve only for severe recessions that are either really severe or really long lasting. Our recession that we're currently in right now is probably not going to turn into a depression. And here's why. Because of the factor that caused this recession is this virus that's going around. And that's something that will be managed over time. It's also something that's not a direct correlation to the actual market. It's an outside influence. But it is something to watch. So we're going to talk about the next step in the business cycle after you hit that recession where things start to go down. There is eventually a point where you hit the trough. And in the trough, it's the lowest point in the business cycle. So this is the point that it hits right before it starts to expand again. So whenever it hits rock bottom, there's only one place to go, and that's up from there. So the trough is what we would call the lowest part in the business cycle. I'm going to read this one part for you here. It says there's usually no general agreement about what causes any particular depression. The cause may sometimes be ill-guided monetary policies adopted by the government or its central banking systems. Recessions may be heightened by excessive speculation on the stock market and buying on credit. And there's others listed here, other reasons that can cause a recession or depression. Just like we were talking about before, the virus, the COVID-19 virus is causing this recession because it creates instability in the market. Typically, anything that creates instability with businesses is not good for the economy in general. The last part here that I'm going to talk about is it is important to remember that recessions in developed countries are not normally times of starvation and despair, even though many people have to postpone satisfaction of their more costly wants for a time. So when we say recession is not a time of doom and gloom. It might be a time where things are a little bit harder and people tend to spend a little bit less money, which is harder on businesses. Some people might even be laid off during this time. Or lose their jobs even. And that is terrible when it happens, and it can definitely have an impact on the ordinary family. But in most scenarios, we have safety nets for most people, such as unemployment, food stamps, things of that nature that the government institutes that keeps people from starving to death like they would in most countries with different types of economies. So keep in mind that even at the lowest point of a capitalistic system, it is still better off than most command economies throughout the world. So I do want you to read the rest of these pages. Like I said, you're going to be reading 183 through 186, and you guys are going to be doing your homework also. Today's homework is page 189, 1 through 3. Make sure you do that. Read over this carefully, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a good day.
Can you